From Miami Law, I'm Annette Uguez, and this is The Explainer.
Well, I'm conflicted about cancel culture because, of course, it's also prevalent in universities as well, and all over social media. So on the one hand, you would want people who say objectively sexist, racist, homophobic, outrageous things to be held accountable. But I don't know that denying the right to speak or automatically calling for terminations or boycotts is always the right thing.
Welcome back to another season of the Miami Law Explainer, the legal affairs podcast where Miami law experts lend context and historical relevance to today's headlines. From Kodak to McDonald's to wokewashing and cancel culture, Miami law compliance expert Marcia Weldon rounds up the summer of misdeeds and missteps in corporate America. Let's go to executive producer Catherine Skip with the interview.
Good morning, Marcia. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so it's been a busy season in compliance world. Is wokewashing when a company is just paying like hypocritical lip service to a cause without really affecting any change?
Sure. So some people in the audience might not even know what wokewashing is. It's actually a term. So, for example, you may have heard of greenwashing, when companies will make all kinds of environmental claims or those other kinds of things. Wokewashing comes from the term woke, the slang term woke, where companies are socially conscious, in tune with what the youth and the community wants, etc. So there's a concept of wokewashing, which actually has been along for a long time, but it's come to the fore lately as we have the Black Lives Matter, anti-racism, social justice protests, and you have all of these companies that have been slapping things up on social media, making all kinds of claims. We're with you. We stand with you. All of these kinds of things, which sound good. But the problem is, companies are faced with the pandemic, the anti-racism movement, and a creating economy all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So some of them want to have what's called a CSR halo effect, CSR for corporate social responsibility, or now it's more called sustainability. But the halo effect of companies that may be doing terrible things to the environment, but they give a lot of money to breast cancer research, people think, oh, that's a fantastic company. So the CSR halo effect is what I think some companies are doing now. They're trying to say, look, we're so committed to anti-racism, and it's not just diversity and inclusion, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've got all the buzzwords. But what's happened is that they go on social media and the employees that actually work at these companies say, really? Because we're not getting paid properly. Or really? You care about Black employees, Black lives? What about the Black employees? Or, you care about me too? What about the female employees that can't get promoted? So it's been a real backlash because they have the platitudes on social media, but they act differently in their own companies. And so you've found actually several companies have been sued through what's called a shareholder derivative suit, where shareholders are suing and plaintiffs' lawyers on behalf of some shareholders are suing Oracle, Facebook, Qualcomm, The Gap. They've been sued recently for claiming to have a commitment to diversity, but really just paying lip service. Are those cases likely to win? Probably not. They're going to have some serious procedural hurdles, but I'm sure those companies are going to be doing more so that they look like they care. And then again, the question will be, is that another form of wokewashing? I taught a class yesterday. has a course on lawyering in a pandemic. So I taught the one on advising companies through COVID. And we talked about this issue and kind of what companies are really sacrificing. So, for example, you have some great companies, Netflix and others, donating not just $1 million, like $100 million. Right. But I joked that, it's not that hard for Netflix to do that. I sit home all day watching shows I never thought I'd watch because all I have to do is be on Zoom or watch Netflix. So I'm not begrudging the donation, but it's a company that's making a lot of money anyway. So giving money is great, but the real question when you're thinking about wokewashing is how do you hire, retain, pay, promote your employees? What are your core values when it's not cool to be, quote, woke? And how are you treating your suppliers in the community?
Was that... So it seems like I heard there was a little wash about that when Nike and the Colin Kaepernick thing that like, oh, this is so great that they're throwing all this money and they're doing this great, Serena Williams, Colin Kaepernick, all these people, but at the same time they have sweatshops in, I don't know, Cambodia or something.
Well, Nike is an interesting issue. So, the kind of business and human rights movement's been around for a long time, but really when Nike had its issues with the sweatshops in the 1990s, it ended up being one of the first companies to join on to promoting and doing more in terms of social responsibility, et cetera. When Nike first did its ad about Colin Kaepernick a few years ago, it was the 30th anniversary of the Just Do It campaign. And that was back when Colin Kaepernick was a pariah to many people. And they took a stand, made an ad about Kaepernick. There was the threat of the boycott. And then there was the, quote, boycott. The boycott meaning we're going to support the company.
Right.
And companies and sporting goods stores that chose to boycott, some of them actually went out of business. So that was before it was, I think, cool or trendy to take a controversial stand. But Nike's always done that. And for them, win or lose, all press is good press, right? Because if anything, people are going to look at the ad to say, what's Nike talking about? What is this horrible thing I'm hearing about that Nike's doing? And so for them, it was I don't even think it was a risk. I think it was a very smart and savvy business move, but also probably more courageous than many other companies would have been at the time. Frankly, I'm really surprised by the level of public statements that companies have come out with. I didn't think many of them would go so far. I don't think it's difficult to say we stand for social justice. The amount of companies that say Black Lives Matter is really surprising to me, and I would not have expected that.
So I was thinking about this morning, where you're having all these companies coming out, Black Lives Matter. Is there a place where, or you have examples where companies have really navigated that divide, like not making it more like a more unifying message, I guess is what, because it seems like everything gets politicized, now Black Lives Matter is left and, this other thing's right and all this. Like, where's that place where you go, hey, we're all going to love each other? Or I don't know.
Well, first there was the diversity movement, then there was the diversity inclusion, and now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So the thought is, are we paying people the same? Are people being treated equitably? Diversity means, we're including, we're inviting you to the table. Now do you get to dance kind of thing? All of those things. So I think that's not really that controversial because diversity can be anything. It could be political ideation. It could be geographic ideation. It could be whether you're left-handed or right-handed. It could be where you went to school. All kinds of things can be considered diversity. And that's actually, long ago when I was in corporate America, that was a big issue. What does it mean to be diverse? Is it just a person who's Black? So, for example, California is enacting its legislation, which is going to require California-based companies to have diverse board members. So what does that mean? If you are in California and San Francisco and you have an Asian board member, is that diverse? It's like in Miami, where is having a Latin board member that's diverse technically, but 70% of the population in Miami is Latin. So I think this is where you're going to see the bigger movement. And that's a very controversial move that California is doing. Do you have a Black person on the board just to say you have a Black person on the board, or do you want to have a Black person because of their range of experience? Does it matter? So these are the questions that I think people are looking at now. And I think it's controversial, but Black Lives Matter is a very controversial statement for companies to make because it can be so polarizing. I don't think diversity, equity, and inclusion is polarizing if it's done the right way.
Right.
If you really have a true diversity.
So I guess part of this conversation has got to be about cancel culture. Because a lot of that is, the president saying, don't shop at such and such a place, or other people saying, don't shop here because they support the president or something. So what should companies do about speech during these kinds of crazy partisan times?
Well, I'm conflicted about cancel culture because, of course, it's also prevalent in universities as well. And all over social media. So on the one hand, you would want people who say objectively sexist, racist, homophobic, outrageous things to be held accountable. But I don't know that denying the right to speak or automatically calling for terminations or boycotts is always the right thing. So for example, remember Ellen DeGeneres? There was a huge backlash when she indicated that she is personal friends with George Bush. I can't remember which one it was, senior. I can't remember which one it was. But
43, yeah.
43, right? Just promoted outrage among some of her fans. Now, should they stop watching the show because she's friends with George Bush? I'm not sure. Should they stop watching if allegations about how she treats her guests and employees are true? That's a different story, So this is a big issue for companies. So the president of Goya, who's a Hispanic male and leads a profitable international food companies, I have Goya products in my cabinet right now, made some statements praising President Trump. That's his right. But he immediately got flack from people asking how he could support a president who's hostile to immigration, especially after the issues with children at the border last year. And so many people called for a boycott. And the president cried foul and he decided this is an example of cancel culture. Some people did, like I said, the boycott. We're going to, this guy supports the president. We support the president. Now we support Goya. The problem was, it's the funniest thing is that this is even a bigger scandal because it's really a family owned company and his family members were outraged because it's not just the company, it's them. So, when you talk about what companies should do, I think one of the biggest problems is people mistakenly believe that they have a First Amendment right in the workplace, and they don't in a private workplace. If you work for the government, if you work for a state school, yes, there are First Amendment rights and issues. The First Amendment's meant to protect you from the government, not your employer. And that's why your employer can have an employee handbook and a code of conduct and can tell you what you can and can't say. But this is a difficult time to be a lawyer representing a company. Should you restrict what your employees wear? Can they wear a Black Lives Matter shirt, an All Lives Matter, a Blue Lives Matter pin? Can they wear a MAGA hat in the workplace? Do you stop that? Do you say just no hats for everybody? Kind of like you do with children. You can't wear a hat. You can't wear a hat. No hats. Nobody wears a hat. Nobody wears a shirt with a saying on it. And some companies have come to that because they just don't want to deal with the political issues. When I was an in-house lawyer during several elections, and this is an issue that people have to think about. Can you wear political campaign buttons? Well, you're still also asking employees to contribute to your PAC, right? So how do you do that? So it's a dicey issue. I feel for lawyers representing companies right now.
Well, it's weird that the president just threw shade all over soup. I'm sorry, that's a Goya product. Buying that soup. So let's switch over to McDonald's. So they're trying to claw back their golden parachute of their CEO after a bunch of unethical behavior. So that CEO, Steve Easterbrook, had this party boy reputation. Why not investigate first and fire for cause, canceling that severance package? Like, where did they, compliance-wise, go so wrong?
So the question is, I don't know if compliance was involved at all, right? Typically, you would like to have compliance involved, but not always. This may have been them hiring outside counsel, which they did. Mm-hmm. Don't know if the board hired the outside counsel, the GC hired the outside counsel, but this was a huge mystery to me because prior to joining academia, I was that outside lawyer who would do these investigations. Mm-hmm. And I was that deputy GC and I was that head of HR and I was that labor person. You always look at the hard drives you don't trust somebody who says, I don't have any emails. Of course not. You investigate. You look at the cell phone records if you have access to that. If you're paying for that cell phone, you say, I want to see the records. Who are you calling? Who are you texting? Of course, there's privacy laws in different states, but there's still what you do. If it's your servers, you look at the emails. You can see stuff that's been deleted. That's why there's forensic people that deal with those kinds of issues. Every plaintiff's lawyer can tell you that. Any family law, practitioner can tell you that nothing's ever really deleted, right? So I was stunned because I thought there had to have been some kind of thorough investigation because even if you're giving somebody a severance package, you still want to make sure it's the right decision, right? So it looks like the initial investigation didn't, looked at what he said. He had deleted emails, which they could have found. And apparently what happened was he was fired for an alleged consensual relationship with a colleague, which is against their code of conduct. And really, you don't want to have that CEO because it can be consensual today and tomorrow it's not, and it's a problem. So he said he deleted the emails, but those, of course, would still be on the company servers. So the board fired him in November. They gave him a $37 million severance package. He denied any other additional sexual relationships. So he walks off with the $37 million, and then McDonald's gets a tip in July. He's fired in November. They get a tip in July that there be at least 3 other women. And so they did another investigation. They find all of this stuff. They want their money back. Now it's in court. McDonald's has called him morally bankrupt. Easterbrook has said, look, this was always in your servers. You could have found this and you never did, which is, the height of gall, but, it's true, right?
Lawyers, right?
That's why those lawyers get paid the big bucks to come up with that. Well, Yeah, I could have lied, but you should have found it, right? So almost sounds like a teenager. Yeah, I lied to you, but you could have checked under my pillow to find the weed, right? That's basically what he's saying, right? And McDonald's has also fired the head of HR for alleged improprieties, who apparently had made a number of women uncomfortable at various company events. So they're investigating HR. They fired that HR person for cause, and it's likely because people probably felt more comfortable coming out after McDonald's fired the CEO. McDonald's has hired a former Boeing executive to be the head of HR, which is smart because Boeing has had its own compliance failures in the past. So it's good to build. If I'm McDonald's, I also hire somebody who's been through scandal or been at a company that's had to go through a real turnaround because they know what that takes. So I give kudos to the board for being willing to terminate a CEO who had engineered a turnaround for what they thought was a consensual relationship. And not many companies would take that step, even in the era of Me Too, right? The clawback is the right thing to do, but not everybody's satisfied because there's already an investor group that's called for resignation of some of the board members. So I ask, where was compliance? Was compliance involved? How much involvement did the GC have? Now, often you're going to have outside counsel handle everything. I don't want to, disparage the outside counsel who did this, but it is investigation 101 that you're going to look at the hard drives. You're going to mirror the hard drives. Don't even tell them that you're doing that before you even start the investigation. Hire the outside firm. Don't ask him any questions. Get the stuff off his hard drives first before you start asking questions. Those kinds of things.
Right. Well, the Kodak deal to produce pharmaceuticals was sort of pulled off the rails by a Security and Exchange Commission insider trading inquiry. So in cases like that, where, a company is maybe from the outside looking like they're stepping up to fill a national need, where's the wrongdoing and how could it have been done right?
So first of all, I don't know the demographics of the people who listen to the podcast. So if you have students, some of them don't even know what Kodak is, right? Because they take all their pictures with their phones, right? Unless you're a photographer, like Kodak, Eastman Kodak, what is that? I don't even know what that is. So it's a really big deal for people who actually know what Kodak is because Kodak is, or actually was, a great historical company for making cameras, film, but completely missed the boat on digital cameras. And so it was pretty much kind of a moribund company that had been borrowing money to stay alive at very high interest rates because very few people use film and they weren't really doing anything else. So they have been tasked, or they don't have it anymore, a $765 million loan from the federal government to make medications for COVID, which surprised everybody, including people in the pharmaceutical industry who say, all right, well, Kodak can make chemicals to develop film, but just going from that to making life-saving medicine is a completely different thing, right? So there's a public-private partnership. The government is spending billions of dollars to have vaccines ready in months versus years. Itself a controversial issue thing. So you pretty much want people who are experts in the pharmaceutical industry. So any number of questions will come up just about the judgment to do the $765 million loan, where it's become, so let's say poor judgment, it is what it is, right? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. It's become an issue because the company issued 1.75 million stock and stock options to company insiders and board members before the public announcement of the federal loan. The stock price soared up 1,000% upon the announcement of the federal loan. Within 48 hours, the option grants, the values had gone up, at least on paper, to $50 million. So people got rich, which leads people to say, we could understand this if this was Pfizer or AstraZeneca, but Kodak, what kind of sweetheart deal was done here for a company, again, that was not even doing very well financially? So it's different when you have General Motors is going to go and make ventilators because, that's not too far off, engines, ventilators, we get it, a clothing company is now going to make masks. Making pharmaceuticals in already a rushed time period with a company that's not a pharmaceutical company caused some questions. What are the relationships between the people in the Kodak company and the Trump administration? All kinds of questions. So the SEC has put a hold to this. I'm sure there's going to be clawbacks of some of that money that's been done, but it's just a sign of, my question was, where was the compliance officers? Where was the GC to say, look, board, this is going to look askance? Or even even if people don't question the judgment, let's make sure you don't trade, because the allegations are insider trading, right? Kodak had material, meaning significant, and an ordinary investor would want to know this, non-public information, and chose to make decisions based on that, right? So let's say you, Catherine, for some reason still had some Kodak stock. Right? You got it as a child back when it was a big deal. You decided to keep it. You're hoping for the turnaround, or you've just completely forgotten. If you knew that they were going to get a $765 million thing, you might choose to buy more stock, especially if nobody else knew it. And that's the question. That's why insider trading harms the marketplace, because the reasonable investor would have wanted to know this. Somebody might have said, I don't own any Kodak stock, but I'm going to buy some today. Right. If I knew that they were going to get it. So if you bought Kodak stock the day after, that stock is wildly more expensive than it would have been the day before. And the only people who got the benefit of that were the people who had the inside information.
So it was definitely a walk like a duck situation. Right.
I'm not accusing anybody of any illegality. That's for the SEC and others to do. Right. But it's just, as lawyers, compliance officers, general counsel, in-house counsel, the role is to act as the gatekeeper, right? So even if this wasn't potentially illegal insider trading, there's some ethical questions about, are we the right people to take money to produce a life-saving vaccine in record time when we don't know how to do this at all? So I have questions. What if the general counsel or the in-house counsel say, I think they're cutting corners, not just for this company, by the way, for any pharmaceutical company. At some point, there's got to be scientists saying, this may be too fast. Are people going to be comfortable being whistleblowers? When there's a public-private partnership with the federal government? Now, I used to be on a whistleblower protection advisory committee. It was a multidisciplinary committee brought up under the Obama administration. As soon as the president came in office, the Whistleblower Protection Advisory Committee was disbanded. Whistleblowers don't have the same level of protection and freedom, much less in a public-private partnership with the federal government. So that's something I'd be particularly worried about. If people are on these big pharma companies and they're seeing things that don't look right, who are they going to tell when your partner is the federal government?
Yeah, sure. Blockbuster making, I don't know, airplanes. Very weird.
Exactly.
So we're talking about the sort of the landscape being particularly ripe for bad actors testing the boundaries of ethics. So is it getting worse or better? Like, it sounds like all this whistleblower, non-protection is actually making things a lot worse.
Well, so there's a different so at the time we were looking at 22 whistleblower laws, and there's dozens more, right? The SEC right now is actually looking at making some changes to the Dodd-Frank whistleblower rules. So they put some proposals out. There's a comment period, et cetera, which may make some things better, may make some things worse. On the other hand, even in the Trump administration, there have been some record-breaking whistleblower awards for securities fraud, financial violations, et cetera. So I'm not saying things are necessarily worse for whistleblowers. I'm saying if you're in a public-private partnership with the government, who are you going to go to, right? So when the president himself has said, I want that $765 million loan to go there, that's where I'm saying is the issue. Yeah. As for things, is it ripe for fraud? I mean, look at the PPP loans. One of the things that they made very clear for these loans for small businesses is that, if you are committing fraud, you might be debarred or prevented from doing business with the federal government in the future. That's a big thing. But you still have people getting loans and buying Lamborghinis and those kinds of things. And
it's a business expense, Marcia. It's a business expense.
Exactly. You got to look like you're making money to earn money. I get it. Again, people do that all the time. So I think is it getting worse? I don't know if it's getting worse, but I think with social media, the way it is, infractions are instantly reported, even before an investigation, by the way. And so, if I was representing a company or if I was a compliance officer, an in-house lawyer, outside lawyer, I'd say, make sure you've got your crisis management plan ready. Make sure that your legal people are aware of the business decisions, and more importantly, that they have the right to raise issues, that they can really keep that gatekeeper role going. Because the minute something gets out, you may take a huge reputational hit, even if you're legally correct. And so are you working with your corporate communications or your PR people? Do you have a crisis management plan? If you say something and the president comes out and says something the next, a few minutes later, is your stock price going to wildly go up or wildly go down? That's a tough time. So I don't know that it's getting worse or better.
You wouldn't want to be Elon Musk's crisis communicator.
Yeah. Yes. I think if you're working for any kind of company, but especially a company with a founder or a CEO that is, expressive and opinionated, that's got a real impact for the shareholders. And the question again is, can boards rein people in? Like Elon Musk has been very expressive, but his stock price is through the roof. So at some point, does that cause people to say, well, we'll just let him be him? Or let's say it's not Elon. We'll just let Catherine be Catherine. She may say things off the wall, but eventually it's making money for the shareholders. And sometimes the concern is it might be making money for the shareholders, but what about the stakeholders? What about the community, the employees, the vendors, the suppliers, all the other people that can be affected by statements or comments or changes in company policy?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Is there any takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
No, I think this is a great time to be a lawyer. It's a great time to be a reporter. We're coming into an election cycle now. Companies are now thinking, what happens if there's a Biden administration? What happens to regulations that were rolled back? Do they come back in play? What companies really care more about than anything is just certainty. Just let's know what the rule is and we can deal with that, right? So companies had prepared, for example, for a number of environmental regulations that got rolled back. Now, do they prepare for them again if there's a Biden administration? If there's a Trump administration, what do you do? Who are you giving political contributions to? There's just so many different things that go on when we're in an election time. Coupled with a pandemic, coupled with the biggest social justice movement probably since the 60s, there's a lot for companies to think about that are beyond their core business of making widgets. And so it's time for lawyers to really think like business people so they can be at the table, like in the Hamilton, musical, be in the room when it happens, so that you can keep yourself from being, talked about on the Miami Law Explainer.
Be nimble, my friends, right?
But if they do that, I can always come back.
Yes, of course. Well, it's been a pleasure as always. Good to see you.
And great talking to you as well.
All right, take care now.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at The Explainer. If you love our show, leave us a 5-star review with your podcast provider and ask your friends to subscribe. You can always drop us a comment at explainer@miami.edu. Our show is engineered and edited by Christopher Alzadi with theme music composed by Rady Kim from the Frost School of Music. I'm your host, Annette Uguez. Today's episode is brought to you by Miami Law's Entertainment and Sports Law Society's September 10th event, Reopening Hollywood. A stellar panel looks at the challenges facing the entertainment industry as it struggles to stand. To register, search Reopening Hollywood at law.miami.edu.